There is a lie you've been fed since childhood. A poison wrapped in gold. Be liked, be loud, be seen, or you will be nothing. You were taught that leadership is a performance, that power belongs to those who command the room with booming voices and grand gestures, who demand attention like thunder demands the sky. But what if everything you've been told is wrong? What if the most dangerous leaders, the ones who shape empires, who bend the world without raising a fist, move in silence? Think of the last time you walked into a room and felt the air shift. Not because someone was shouting, but because they didn't have to. There is a quiet force in certain people, an invisible gravity that pulls others into orbit without a single word. You felt it, that unsettling magnetism around the person who speaks softly but carries an unshakable certainty. The one whose silence is louder than any applause. That is the essence of true power. And it is the very power Machiavelli, the great strategist of human nature, understood better than anyone. Machiavelli's name is often dragged through the mud, reduced to caricature. A grinning puppet master pulling strings in the shadows. But those who truly understand him know his genius was not in cruelty, but in perception. He saw what most miss, that the loudest voice in the room is rarely the most powerful. The conquerors who last are not the ones who roar like lions, but those who observe like foxes. The quiet leader does not seek approval. They command it. They do not demand loyalty. They inspire it. And in that subtlety lies their invincibility. Consider this. A storm makes noise, rattles windows, uproots trees. But it is the tide, silent and relentless, that reshapes continents. The same is true of influence. The charismatic loudmouth may seize the stage, but it is the quiet strategist who writes the script. History's most formidable rulers, from the Medici to modern titans of industry, rarely wasted breath on empty speeches. They listened. They waited. And when they struck, it was with surgical precision, not brute force. You were conditioned to believe that to lead, you must be heard. But the prison of that belief is this. When you are always speaking, you are never learning. When you are always performing, you are never planning. The quiet leader wins because they are free from the need to be validated in the moment. They are the spider at the center of the web, feeling every vibration, knowing exactly when to act, and when to let others think they are in control. This is the paradox Machiavelli unveils. The greatest power is often mistaken for weakness. The silent are underestimated. The reserved are overlooked. And in that blindness of others lies the silent leader's advantage. While the loud are busy declaring their strength, the quiet are using it. So ask yourself, have you been playing the wrong game? Have you been shouting to be heard when you should have been listening to win? The truth is, the world belongs to those who understand the weight of silence. And if you're brave enough to strip away the mask of performative leadership, you might just find your own quiet dominance waiting beneath. The quiet leader does not rise by accident. Their power is not a fluke of personality, but a deliberate mastery of human nature's darkest, most unspoken truths. To understand why silence outmaneuvers noise, we must first dissect the core principles that govern influence. Principles Machiavelli himself wove into the fabric of his philosophy. At the heart of it lies a brutal irony. What the masses perceive as strength is often weakness in disguise, and what they dismiss as passivity is frequently control in its purest form. Consider the myth of the alpha. Society worships the figure who dominates conversations, who asserts with unshakable bravado, who seems to bend reality through sheer force of will. But this is a child's understanding of power. True dominance is not about who makes the most noise. It's about who controls the narrative. The loud leader is a slave to their own visibility. Every word they speak is a potential vulnerability. Every outburst a clue to their intentions. The quiet leader, by contrast, operates in the negative space. Their influence grows not because they impose, but because they allow others to impose upon them. Revealing just enough to guide, never enough to be predicted. Machiavelli's fox and lion duality captures this perfectly. The lion relies on fear, on the spectacle of force. But the The fox survives by knowing what the lion does not. That perception is more potent than reality. A quiet leader is the fox incarnate. They understand that power is not seized, it is lured. When others speak, they gather intelligence. When others posture, they identify leverage. And when others exhaust themselves in the performance of leadership, the quiet leader steps in, unerring, inevitable, to claim the throne. There is a deeper layer here, one that transcends mere strategy. The quiet leader wins because they grasp a fundamental law of human psychology. Uncertainty breeds submission. The human mind, when faced with silence, cannot help but fill the void with its own assumptions, its own fears, its own projections. A loud leader tells you what to think. A quiet leader lets you think for them. This is why the silent are so often feared. Their restraint is a mirror, and in that reflection, others see not the leader's limitations, but their own. Think of the chessboard. The amateur moves pieces with frantic energy, declaring their strategy with every play. The grandmaster, though, they sit still. They watch. They make you wonder if they've even begun to fight, until it's far too late. The quiet leader is the grandmaster of social dynamics. They know that influence is not about speed, but timing. Not about volume, but precision. And most crucially, they know that the greatest power is the power not used. This is the essence of Machiavellian quietude. The understanding that visibility is a currency, and every unnecessary word spent diminishes its value. The loud leader must constantly prove their worth. The quiet leader's worth is assumed, because in the absence of evidence, the human mind defaults to reverence. History's most effective rulers knew this. They spoke sparingly, moved deliberately, and let their silence do the heavy lifting. When they finally acted, it was not a request. It was a revelation. So the question is not whether quiet leaders win. They do, always, in the long run. The question is whether you are willing to unlearn the addiction to noise, to embrace the unbearable tension of silence, and to wield the most terrifying power of all. The power of being misunderstood until it's too late. History does not remember the loudest voices. It remembers the ones that spoke at the right moment. Consider the ancient parable of the two rivers. One roared through the valley, churning and frothing, declaring its power to anyone within earshot. The other moved in silence, its depths unseen, its current steady and unfathomable. When the drought came, the first river vanished within days, its energy spent on spectacle. The second remained, because it had never needed to prove itself. This is the quiet leader's secret. They are the deep river. Their strength is not in the surface, but in what they choose not to reveal. There is a reason Machiavelli reserved his highest praise for leaders like Cesare Borgia, who mastered the art of strategic silence. Borgia did not conquer cities by announcing his plans. He let his enemies underestimate him until the trap was already sprung. He understood that the most effective narratives are not the ones you tell, but the ones others tell about you in your absence. The quiet leader cultivates mystery like a gardener tends to shadows, knowing that what is hidden often grows more potent than what is seen. This is not passivity. It is predation in its most refined form. Think of the owl in the dead of night. It does not screech to announce its presence. It waits, listens, and strikes without warning. The forest belongs to the owl not because it is the strongest creature, but because it understands the power of patience. Human hierarchies operate on the same principle. The executive who dominates every meeting may feel powerful in the moment, but it is the one who watches from the periphery, who speaks only to deliver the killing blow to an argument, who ultimately controls the room. Their silence is not empty. It is a weapon sheathed until the perfect instant. There is an even darker truth here, one that Machiavelli would recognize immediately. Silence is the ultimate deception. When you refuse to reveal your thoughts, you force others to project their own fears and desires onto you. The quiet leader becomes a mirror, and in that reflection, people see what they most want or most dread. This is how legends are built, not through declarations, but through absence. The more you withhold, the more others imagine. The less you say, the more your eventual words weigh. Consider the courtroom strategist who lets the opposition talk themselves into a corner, or the negotiator who waits out the silence until the other side caves. These are not tricks. They are applications of a fundamental law. That influence flows to those who can endure the tension of the unsaid. The symbolic power of quiet leadership extends beyond mere tactics. It taps into something primal in the human psyche, our terror of the unknown. A loud enemy can be assessed, measured, countered. But silence is the abyss into which all certainty disappears. The quiet leader leverages this terror not through malice, but through sheer discipline. They know that in a world addicted to noise, the ability to remain still becomes a superpower. While others rush to fill every silence with chatter, the quiet leader lets the emptiness work for them. It is the ultimate reversal. Where others expend energy to be heard, the silent conserve energy to be obeyed. This is why myths across cultures venerate the figure who speaks little but sees all. The Odins, the Guanyins, the Sphinxes who ask riddles rather than give answers. They represent the unsettling truth that real mastery lies not in having the last word, but in making sure your first word is the only one that matters. The quiet leader understands that language, at its core, is a system of leaks. Every sentence is a surrender of control. And so they ration their words like a general rations ammunition, knowing most battles are won before the first shot is fired. The true test of power lies not in understanding these principles, but in the blood and bone work of applying them to the relentless friction of daily life. Consider the modern corporate battlefield, a theater where most executives still mistake volume for authority, where the addiction to performative decisiveness leaves trails of exhausted teams and half-baked strategies in its wake. The quiet leader navigates this landscape differently. They know that in a boardroom of shouting voices, the person who waits to speak last doesn't just control the meeting. They reveal who actually holds power by who waits for their approval. This is no mystical art. It's the scalpel-like application of restraint as a competitive advantage. In negotiations, the quiet leader thrives where others falter because they've mastered the unbearable tension of silence. Where most rush to fill voids with concessions or compromises, the silent strategist lets the emptiness amplify the other side's desperation. It's not manipulation. It's understanding that time pressures everyone except those willing to walk away. The CEO who pauses 15 seconds before responding to an acquisition offer isn't being theatrical. They're recalibrating the entire power dynamic of the conversation. Their silence forces the opposition to negotiate against themselves, volunteering better terms without being asked. This is Machiavelli's fox at work. The intelligence to let others defeat themselves through their own impatience. Team dynamics reveal an even more profound truth about quiet leadership. The manager who dominates every discussion creates followers at best and resentful subordinates at worst. But the leader who listens, genuinely, intensely, does something far more dangerous. They create apostles. When people feel heard rather than lectured, they don't just comply, they commit. The quiet leader's power multiplies because it lives in the minds and actions of their team. Their silence becomes a vacuum that pulls others into fuller expression of their capabilities. And in that expansion, the leader's influence grows without direct exertion. This is why special operations units and elite surgical teams train to communicate with glances and gestures. The highest levels of performance belong to those who've moved beyond the crutch of constant verbal validation. The personal transformation required to wield this power demands brutal self-honesty. It begins with diagnosing your own addictions to noise, the reflexive need to weigh in on every issue, the anxiety when conversations continue without your input, the ego's craving for visible recognition. Breaking these patterns feels like withdrawal because it is. The quiet leader isn't born. They're forged through the conscious denial of immediate gratification in service of lasting authority. Start small. Let one meeting pass without asserting your opinion unless absolutely necessary. Observe how others reveal weaknesses when not prompted by your presence. Resist the urge to claim credit for victories that speak for themselves. With each exercise of restraint, your capacity for meaningful action grows sharper, more precise, more feared. The cultural implications are unavoidable. We've built institutions that reward the wrong kind of leadership. Schools that prioritize participation trophies over strategic observation. Companies that promote the loudest voices rather than the most consequential thinkers. Yet the quiet revolution is already underway. From special forces units to hedge funds to crisis negotiators, the domains where stakes are highest have always known the truth. Real control belongs to those comfortable with silence. As AI and automation make human attention the ultimate scarce resource, the ability to listen deeply and act sparingly will separate the figureheads from the true architects of the future. This is your transformational crossroads. The world has trained you to believe leadership requires visibility, constant communication, immediate response. But history's shadows tell a different story, of rulers who shaped centuries through selective speech, of strategists who won wars by letting enemies mistake patience for weakness. The choice is brutal in its simplicity. Continue chasing the dopamine hit of being heard in the moment, or cultivate the sobering power of being remembered in the long arc of consequence. The quiet leader's path isn't about muting your voice. It's about weaponizing your silence so when you finally choose to speak, the world has no choice but to lean in. Machiavelli's real lesson wasn't about cruelty. It was about the courage to let others underestimate you until the exact moment they can't. That moment is coming. The question is whether you'll be loud when it arrives. Already,